The gear that broke the world. The air in Technology City didn't feel like air. It felt like recycled exhaustion. Yumi stood on the yellow safety line of the Platform 4 subway station, her knuckles white as she gripped the handle of her laptop bag. It was 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, the peak of the corporate rush. Around her, a sea of black blazers and glowing smartphone screens moved in a rhythmic, terrifying synchronization. "I'm sorry," she whispered to a man who bumped her shoulder. He didn't look back. "Excuse me, sorry," she murmured again as she tried to make space for a woman with a stroller. Yumi was 23, but her soul felt like it had been through a century of paper shredders. She was the ideal employee, which was a polite way of saying she was the girl who never said no. She took the extra shifts, she fixed the spreadsheets the seniors messed up, and she lived on lukewarm convenience store ramen. Her only dream was simple: to be useful, to not disappoint. Suddenly, the world tilted. The screech of the approaching train sounded like a banshee's wail. A sharp, icy needle of pain stabbed through Yumi's chest, radiating down her left arm. The laptop bag felt like it was filled with lead. Her knees buckled as she hit the cold, grime-streaked tiles. The first thing she felt wasn't fear. It was embarrassment. "Oh no," she thought, her vision blurring as the black boots of commuters swarmed around her. "I'm blocking the way. Everyone is going to be late for their meetings because of me. I'm so sorry." Darkness rushed in. But as her heart gave its final stuttering beat, the smartphone in her hand didn't go dark. It pulsed with a blinding, ethereal light. Yumi's consciousness felt like it was being pulled through a straw. The sounds of the subway faded, replaced by a haunting melody of flutes and the smell of ancient pine needles. Chapter 2. The Princess of Pain. Yumi opened her eyes to a sky that was too blue to be real. She wasn't on a subway platform. She was lying on a velvet cushion inside a horse-drawn carriage. Her heavy corporate suit had been replaced by layers of suffocatingly beautiful silk and lace. Her hands, once calloused from typing, were now soft, pale, and adorned with a ring bearing a crest she didn't recognize. A weeping willow entwined with a sword. "Welcome, Savior Yumi." A floating, translucent window hovered in the air. "Princess? Me?" Yumi scrambled to look in a polished silver mirror nearby. The face staring back was hers, but refined, the eyes wider, the skin luminous. But the luxury was a lie. Outside the carriage windows, the world was a nightmare. The land of Ojek was a continent scarred by a 1,000-year war. The High Elves had used forbidden undead magic to wipe out the ancient dragons, turning the world into a graveyard. Now, the elves ruled as tyrants, and the White Walkers, reanimated corpses of fallen warriors, roamed the forests. Suddenly, the carriage jerked. A scream tore through the air. "White Walkers, protect the princess!" The door of the carriage was ripped off its hinges. Two creatures, their skin the color of curdled milk and eyes glowing with a ghostly blue fire, reached for her. They weren't zombies. They were fast, silent, and smelled of the deep grave. Yumi did the only thing she knew how to do. She panicked. She grabbed a heavy decorative vase and hurled it at them. "I'm sorry," she screamed, as the vase shattered against a walker's head. It didn't even flinch. It grabbed her by the hair, dragging her out into the dirt. As she lay there, the heavy silk of her dress pinning her down like a trap, a shadow eclipsed the sun. A man on a black stallion leapt over the wreckage. With a movement so fluid it looked like water, he drew a silver blade. Shink. The two white walkers were decapitated before their heads could even hit the ground. The man dismounted. He was tall, with the pointed ears of an elf, but the rugged, scarred build of a mercenary. He was Castel Earth Flavis Lane. "Are you on a suicide mission, princess?" His voice was deep, like a cello. "Or do you just enjoy walking through forests infested with the dead?" Yumi stared at him, breathless. I'm a merchant," she blurted out, trying to remember the lies the system had suggested. Castel looked at her expensive silk dress, her jeweled rings, and her trembling hands. He let out a short, dry laugh. "A merchant? Then you're the worst merchant in history. You smell like fresh milk and expensive soaps. Only aristocrats smell like that." He reached out a hand. "I'm going to the Imperial City. If you want to live to see the sunset, get on the horse." Chapter 3: The Brother and the Blade. The Imperial Palace of Pain was a masterpiece of Gothic horror. Tall spires of black stone that seemed to bleed when it rained. Yumi had spent the journey clinging to Castel's waist, her face buried in his back. He was a mystery, a merchant who moved like a general and carried a blade that hummed with magic. But the moment they reached the palace gates, he vanished, leaving her with a cryptic warning. "In this house, the walls have ears, and the ears belong to a madman." She soon found out who he meant. As Yumi entered the great hall, a man sprinted toward her. This was Prince Hughes, her brother. He was handsome, but his eyes were too bright, dancing with an instability that made Yumi's skin crawl. "Yumi!" He pulled her into a hug that was far too tight. "The scout said your carriage was destroyed. I thought I had lost my favorite toy." Toy. The word sent a chill down Yumi's spine. Hughes pulled back, his hands gripping her shoulders. "You're lucky the Union Empire's wedding is in 4 days. If you had died, I wouldn't have had anyone to walk down the aisle with." Through the system's data dump, Yumi realized the horrifying truth. Hughes was obsessed. He didn't want a sister. He wanted a possession. He was planning to marry Princess Regina of the Union Empire solely to gain the power to overthrow the Emperor. And his plan for Yumi? To keep her locked in the Imperial harem, a golden cage where she would never see the sun again. "Brother," Yumi said, her voice trembling. "I'm tired. I wish to rest." Hugh's smile dropped. It was like a mask falling off. "Rest? You've been resting in the dirt, Yumi. You will go to your room and you will stay there until the dressmakers arrive. If you try to run again, I'll kill the horse you rode in on, and then I'll kill the man who brought you here." Yumi retreated to her room, her heart hammering. She was in a world of magic and dragons, but she was still a gear. Only now, the machine was her own family. She pulled the dragon manual from under her pillow, a gift from the system. As she opened it, the pages glowed. Yumi looked at her reflection. The working girl from Technology City was gone. If she wanted to survive, she couldn't just be useful. She had to be dangerous. The air in the Imperial Palace of Pain always felt 10 degrees colder than the world outside. For Yumi, the next 48 hours were a blur of measuring tapes, heavy velvet, and the suffocating presence of Hughes's guards. Every time she turned a corner, a pair of eyes, either human or the hollow glowing sockets of an undead sentry, followed her. She was being prepared for her brother's wedding, not as a guest, but as a centerpiece. "Hold still, Your Highness," the head maid, a woman with skin like parchment, hissed as she pulled a corset tight. Yumi gasped, her lungs feeling as though they were being crushed by iron bands. It was a familiar sensation, the same pressure she felt back in Technology City when her boss dumped a 1,000-row spreadsheet on her desk at 4:55 p.m. But here, the stakes weren't a missed bonus. They were her very soul. Once the maids retreated, a soft knock echoed at the door. It wasn't the heavy, rhythmic thud of a guard. It was delicate. In walked Princess Regina. She moved with a grace that defied her blindness. Her eyes were clouded over, like white marbles dipped in milk, yet she navigated the room as if she could see the very threads of reality. "The silk in this room is too loud, Yumi," Regina said, her voice a calm stream in a forest of thorns. "It screams of a bird trying to pluck its own feathers." Yumi stood, holding her breath. "Princess Regina, I didn't expect you." Regina smiled, reaching out a hand until her fingers brushed the cold stone of the fireplace. "My brother, the Emperor of Union, thinks he is sending me here to be a queen. Your brother Hughes thinks he is taking me to be a trophy. They are both wrong." She turned her head toward Yumi, her sightless eyes seeming to pierce through the girl's corporate refugee soul. "I know about the wine, Yumi. I know about the Cretan snake venom. My ears have heard the whispers of the servants who scrub the vats. Your brother doesn't just want a crown. He wants a funeral for the old world." Yumi felt her heart hammer. "If you know, why are you still here? We have to stop him." Regina stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I am a blind girl in a world of monsters. I cannot run. But you have the scent of something ancient on you. Fresh milk, pine, and dragon scales." She pressed a small, cold object into Yumi's palm. It was a whistle carved from a bone that felt unnaturally warm. "This is a dragon call. It was stolen from the ruins of the north. Use it when the first toast is poured. If you don't, the land of Ojek will become a land of ash." As Regina left, the system window popped up. Left alone in the moonlit chamber, Yumi pulled the dragon manual from its hiding place. The book felt alive, pulsing like a heart. "Okay, system," Yumi whispered. "I was a data analyst. I can learn a manual. Tell me how to not die." Suddenly, the room dissolved. Yumi wasn't in a palace anymore. She was back in the subway station. 11 a.m. She saw her own body lying on the floor. She saw her boss standing over her corpse, looking at his watch and sighing because the quarterly report was in her bag. She saw her parents crying, not because she was gone, but because she hadn't finished paying off her debt. "Is this it?" A voice boomed. Castell stood in the center of the subway station, his silver blade drawn. But he looked different. Taller, his ears sharper, his eyes burning with blue fire. "You were a gear, Yumi. You lived to be used. You died to be out of the way. Do you want that to be your story?" "No!" Yumi screamed, her voice echoing through the phantom station. "Then break the machine!" Castell roared. He swung his sword, not at her, but at the subway train. The metal shattered like glass, dissolving into a massive black-scaled wing. Yumi reached out. She didn't grab a sword. She grabbed the air itself. She channeled all the years of "I'm sorry," all the years of "I'll do it," and turned them into a single white-hot flame of rage. She woke up on the floor of her palace room, drenched in sweat. Her hands were glowing. She looked at the dragon manual. The first page was now clear. To lead a dragon, one must first refuse to be led by men. But the training wasn't over. A shadow moved on her balcony. "You learn fast," Castell said, stepping into the room. He wasn't wearing his merchant's cloak. He was in full battle gear, the immortal stone glowing on a chain around his neck. "The prince is moving the timeline up," Castell said, his face grim. "The wedding isn't in 2 days. It's tomorrow at noon. He knows someone is spying. He's going to kill the emperor before the sun sets tomorrow." Yumi stood up, her legs shaking but her gaze steady. "I'm not ready." "No one is ever ready for a revolution, Yumi," Castell said, stepping closer. He reached out, his thumb brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "But tomorrow, you have to decide. Are you the girl who falls on the subway floor, or are you the woman who rides the fire?" The day of the wedding arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. The great hall was a sea of gold and blood-red banners. Thousands of nobles from across the continent had gathered, their laughter ringing out like breaking glass. At the head of the table sat the Emperor of Union, an old man whose skin looked like wet parchment, unaware that his death was sitting in a crystal decanter of wine just inches away. Hughes stood at the altar, looking every bit the conquering hero. Beside him, Regina stood in her white veil, a silent ghost. Yumi was positioned on a raised dais, a princess for all to see. Under her heavy silk skirts, she felt the bone whistle Regina had given her. In her mind, the dragon manual was scrolling through its final instructions. Hughes raised his glass. The room went silent. "To a new era!" Hughes shouted, his eyes darting toward the emperor. "To a world where the strong lead and the weak follow." The servants began to pour. The wine was a deep, shimmering crimson, the color of a Cretan snake's tongue. Yumi looked at Castell, who was disguised as a guard near the entrance. He gave her a subtle nod. She looked at Regina, who was gripping her bouquet so hard her knuckles were white. The emperor raised his glass to his lips. "Stop!" Yumi's voice didn't just speak, it erupted. She stood up, knocking her chair over. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Hughes froze, his face twitching. "Yumi, sit down. You're making a scene." "I'm done being a scene." Yumi walked toward the emperor, her eyes burning with the blue fire she had discovered in her dreams. "That wine is poisoned. My brother is a murderer." The hall exploded into whispers. Hugh's face turned a shade of purple that was almost black. "She's mad!" Hughes shrieked, signaling his undead guards. "The stress of the journey has broken her mind. Take her to the dungeons." The undead guards surged forward, their blue eyes flickering. But Yumi didn't run. She took the bone whistle and blew. No sound came out, at least not a sound human ears could hear. But the ground beneath the palace began to groan. The massive stained glass windows shattered inward. A shadow so vast it blotted out the sun fell over the great hall. A black claw, the size of a carriage, slammed through the roof of the hall, crushing the altar where Hughes stood. The dragon had arrived. The gear that broke the world. Chapter 7. The sky is falling. The great hall, once a symbol of unyielding elven architecture, was now a slaughterhouse of stone and silk. When the roof imploded under the weight of the midnight dread, the screams of the nobility were drowned out by a sound that felt like the earth itself was screaming. Hughes had been thrown back by the shockwave, his pristine white wedding tunic stained with the dust of centuries. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fanatical jealousy. "My dragon," he wheezed, reaching out a hand. "I bought you. I paid for you with the blood of my enemies." The dragon, a colossal mountain of obsidian scales and obsidian fire, ignored him. Its eyes, swirling nebulae of violet and gold, were fixed solely on the girl standing in the middle of the debris. Yumi stood her ground. For the first time in 2 lives, she didn't apologize for the mess. She didn't look for someone to tell her what to do. The dragon manual in her mind had ceased its scrolling text. It was no longer a set of instructions. It was a part of her heartbeat. "Yumi, get back!" Castell shouted, drawing the silver blade that hummed with the resonance of the immortal stone. He carved a path through the undead guards, his movements a blur of lethal efficiency. "The dragon isn't tamed, it's just hungry." "He's not hungry for meat, Castell," Yumi said, her voice sounding amplified, as if she were speaking through a canyon. She stepped toward the beast. "He's hungry for a reason to exist." She placed her hand on the dragon's snout. The heat was immense, enough to singe the fine silk of her sleeves, but she didn't flinch. The dragon let out a low, vibrating hum that shattered every wine glass left on the tables. The poisoned crimson liquid spilled across the floor, useless and forgotten. "Kill her!" Hughes shrieked to his remaining guards. "She's stealing my power! Kill the glitch!" But the undead guards stopped. Their blue eyes flickered and then turned violet, matching the dragon's gaze. Regina, standing by the ruins of the altar, ripped off her white veil. Her sightless eyes were glowing. "The machine is broken, Hughes," Regina said, her voice echoing Yumi's. "The stars you tried to extinguish are burning you alive." The dragon opened its maw. A blast of violet flame erupted, not at the people, but at the foundations of the palace. The state of pain was being unmade. The battle shifted to the sky. Yumi felt herself hoisted onto the dragon's back by a gust of magical wind. As they ascended, she saw the land of Ojek for what it truly was, a beautiful, broken tapestry of forests and fires. Castell climbed up beside her, his hand gripping the scales. He looked at her, his usual mask of cool indifference finally shattered. "You did it," he breathed. "You actually broke the cycle." "Not yet," Yumi said, pointing down. Hughes had consumed a shard of the immortal stone in a desperate bid for power. He was transforming, his body bloating into a grotesque pale imitation of a giant, his skin turning into the same curdled milk texture as the White Walkers. He was becoming the very nightmare he had used to terrorize his people. "Give it to me!" The creature that was once Hughes roared, jumping from the crumbling spire toward the dragon. "I am the hero of this story. I am the one who survived." Castell stepped forward, the stone around his neck pulsing. "You didn't survive, Hughes. You just refused to die. There's a difference." Castell threw the stone. It didn't strike Hughes. It merged with the dragon's fire. The blast that followed wasn't one of heat, but of time. It was a wave of pure, concentrated endings. Everything that was forced to live past its time, the undead, the White Walkers, and Hughes himself, began to dissolve into ash. Yumi watched as her brother's face, filled with a final agonizing realization of his own insignificance, vanished into the wind. She felt a pang of sadness, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of profound relief. The favored gear of the Clark family was gone. The perfect employee of Technology City was gone. Chapter 9, The World Without Gears. The sun rose over a different land of Ojek. The White Walkers were gone. The undead army had returned to the earth. Yumi sat on a cliffside overlooking the ruins of the Palace of Pain. Regina stood beside her, the blind queen who now led the Union Empire with a vision that transcended sight. Castell approached them, his black stallion grazing nearby. He looked at Yumi, who was now dressed in simple travel leathers, the dragon manual tucked into a bag at her side. "So," Castell said, his voice regaining its playful edge, "the Merchant King needs a partner. There are new trade routes to open. No kings, no tyrants, just people." Yumi looked at her hands. They were scarred, tan, and strong. She thought back to the subway station. 11 a.m. The smell of recycled air and the sound of people stepping over her. "I spent my whole life trying to be useful to people who didn't care if I lived or died," Yumi said softly. "I thought being powerful meant having people fear me. But power is just not having to say sorry for taking up space." She looked at the midnight dread, perched on a nearby peak like a guardian deity. "I think I'll stay," Yumi said. "There's a lot of work to do, but this time I'm not doing it because I'm told to. I'm doing it because it's mine." Yumi smiled and closed the system window for the last time. She didn't need a floating screen to tell her who she was. She was the girl who fell. She was the princess who ran. And finally, she was the woman who flew. The gears had stopped turning. For the first time in history, the world was moving on its own. Epilogue, 11:01 a.m. In a city of steel and glass. On a subway platform far away, a paramedic checked the pulse of a young woman in a black blazer. "She's gone," he whispered. But as he looked at her face, he frowned. Most people who died like this looked stressed, their brows furrowed with the weight of unfinished tasks. But this girl, she was smiling. It was the smile of someone who had just walked through a door and found exactly what she was looking for. On the floor beside her, her smartphone screen flickered one last time before going dark forever. It didn't show a spreadsheet or a missed call. It showed a single, gold-leafed word, free.